Let's just wait for YouTube to do its thing.
Hmm.
Something's happening. Oh, and ladies and gentlemen, it is Friday night. It's 7:30. Welcome to episode 68 of Thompsin and Other Disappointments. Thanks very much for everyone that's been tuning into the live streams the last few weeks. And the solo episodes that I've been doing seem to be gaining quite a lot of traction. So I just want to give a quick shout out to everyone that's tuning into those and commenting on them. Feeling the love, to be honest, feeling it. Joining me tonight, I've got a guest. If you're new to the podcast, I do a sort of solo thing on Wednesday usually, and then on a Friday night, I'm joined by a guest, and I talk to them about their particular area of expertise. It's usually an area of interest for me, or I don't know, I get a couple of friends on and we talk shit about politics or whatever. This week, I'm super psyched about my guest. An area I suppose that I've not explored to date on this podcast has been sort of the sensibility of the sort of like the enterprising individual, like to be something of an entrepreneur. Now, I would never classify myself as an entrepreneur because I just, in my mind, when I say that word, I get sort of connotations of success and, you know, having a separate account for investment money and chairing meetings with various investors and lenders and all that stuff. I'm definitely nowhere near that. But I respect it hugely. I suppose my girlfriend is in more that sort of arena with regards to investors and meeting lenders and stuff. But I find it all very fascinating. And I suppose I, like a lot of people, have had various ideas in the past where I've thought that would make a good business, or somebody should create a startup for that. Or so super psyched tonight to get a startup strategist on to discuss this with me, her profession, some of the challenges that she's been up against. Please welcome to the show my guest this week, Lee Lamb. Woo!
Hi everyone. Hi. How you doing?
Hey, I'm good, thanks. How are you? How's your week
Yeah.
been?
Good. Busy. Been doing lots and lots of talking. So
Good.
looking forward to yet another lot of talking.
Yeah, I'm sorry to not give you a break from that. I suppose a good place to start, as ever, with any of my guests, is really to sort of get an understanding of how you came to do what you do, because startup strategist is not a job title that's sort of bandied about too often, I wouldn't have thought, and it's not something I remember coming up in like careers advice, counselling, that sort of stuff. So, how did you come to do this?
Well, without giving too much of a life story, I started in corporates. So I was in financial services, technology roles, started doing more sort of COO, chief of staff type roles, which is
Mm,
basically the running of the department or the running of the company. And eventually got tired of the corporate life, as I think 90% of the people do. So wanted to start out on my own and actually just went to startup events thinking, oh, I'm just going to be a very generic business consultant, probably go for bigger companies, but just kept getting pinged to the wall by startups asking what they thought were silly questions. Like they didn't want to sound dumb in front of anyone else. So they were asking what they thought of silly questions. I knew the answer and I thought, well, hold on a second, there's a gap here of people who it's not that they haven't got the business idea, it's that they haven't got the confidence to go forwards. They don't know if they present as a business owner as much as they like. So I ended up starting Your Startup Partner, which that's what I do. I just help them strategize. So wherever they're entering the market and whichever market they're going into, they've got
yeah.
a plan that they feel is like manageable.
Okay, so your job, I suppose, your profession, is sort of taking people like almost like hand holding through that first step of like, I've got an idea, I think it could be something, but I'm not sure how to take the first sort of baby steps in terms of like realizing it.
Yeah, definitely. Because there's always people thinking, well, if it was that good an idea, it'd already be there, right? And so they put all sorts of blocks in their way, and half the time the idea hasn't gone anywhere because the right person hasn't come up with the right idea. So I try to just encourage them to give it a go. And because of my background, I think automatically about risk and making sure that the risk that you take isn't too big for who you are. So, I'm not a fan of this. You've got to go all in, sell up, and use everything to go into business, because you don't have to. So I just help people get more realistic versions that they feel comfortable with, that then makes them think, yeah, I can do this.
So then how does that, right? So let's say, because this is, I've been itching to ask people this sort of question for ages. So let's say I'm just sort of Joe Blogs down the street. I've got a wicked idea for a new web app or mobile app or like shop or whatever. I don't know how to get it off the ground, and I am nervy about having to sell my flat to release capital to fund it. Instead of what even are my options to be able to start a business?
Well, there's quite a few. I mean, there's a lot of open source things out there now. So things that can help you build an app or build the technology yourself, give you a platform. But in a lot of cases, there's local authorities that will give you training and guidance and funding grants to help you get your idea off the ground. Particularly if it would maybe mean that you hire people in the local economy. They're always quite up for that. But really, it's about starting to have the conversation with people and going into meetings and events where other people with other ideas come along. And you may not know the right people right now, but they do. And so it's usually about the confidence to just go out there and say, I've got this idea, who out there can help me? And you usually find someone.
Have you, like, because you come across quite sort of like self-assured and confident, and obviously, like, I guess what you're tapping into there is like sometimes people don't necessarily have the confidence to go, straight forward for it. Have you always been confident and self-assured, or is it something that you've had to kind of pick up along the way, or somebody's had to kind of handhold you, or?
Not at all, not at all. I think when I was younger, I was really underconfident and kind of hid in academia quite a lot. I did like a law degree, and I just thought I just want to keep studying. But then, because the first job I got was in a bank, they are quite alpha places, right? You can't be a wallflower and try to progress in the companies. It's just the vibe that they have. So I sort of developed this ability to go, if I know what I'm talking about, then I'm going to be confident in it. If I don't know what I'm talking about, I'll be confident in saying I don't know what I'm talking about. But that has helped me just get to the point where I'm just more comfortable to say, yeah, I can help in these ways, I can't help in these ways. And actually, I find that helps the people that I work with, because it's not about knowing all the answers. It's about going, I know that bit, don't know that bit, I need help here. And
Yeah.
then they see, oh, actually, I don't have to be this really overconfident, extroverted person to go and start my own business.
Yeah, and it's quite a giant skill set to adopt, I think. And I mean, I'm speaking mostly from personal experience here, and fueled by conversations that I've had with my girlfriend. But we sort of agreed that this is a thing that people usually only hone, like in their 30s, is the confidence to be able to say, I don't know the answer to that, or like I don't think I can help you with that. Like when you're in your 20s, when you're a graduate or you're in your first couple of jobs, there's I feel like there's a definite sort of pressure there that you have to like pretend almost that you do know the answers to everything, or you do have to say yes to everything, and then you go away and figure out how you're actually going to do the thing that you just said yes to,
Yeah, but then I think that is primarily in the work environment, not in entrepreneurship. Because like my youngest client is 19 years old. He started his business when he was 16.
Right.
And actually, what I'm seeing more is younger and younger people thinking, I look at the job markets and it's either jobs I don't want, jobs I can't do, or there's just no job there for me. It's ridiculous how many jobs say you need 5 years experience in a starter role. It's crazy. So if you don't have any choice, you can't go into that world. You've got nothing to lose by trying to start up a business, because you go, well, if I'm going to mess up, at least this is on my terms. And so that confidence of experience is kind of replaced with, I might as well give it a go. Yes, when you get to your 30s, actually you start having bills to pay and mouths to feed and all that, and then you go through that confidence development cycle. But when they're younger, they're just like, yeah, might as well give it a go.
Yeah, yeah. Did you see that there was a viral clip of Jim Carrey that went around, must have been 3 or 4 years ago, and he was talking about a conversation that he'd had with his late father, who had worked his entire life as an accountant on the basis that it was a safe job, and only to be made redundant and lose everything.
Yeah.
And I think Jim Carrey said, like, my dad was like a funny guy, like he could have been a comedian, like a great comedian, but he didn't pursue what he loved because he felt like this was the safe option, this was the responsible option, and it turned out that it kicked him in the arse and left him with nothing.
Yeah.
And there's a sort of, I mean, it's not exactly the same, right? But there's a sort of parallel there in the sense that you may as well pursue what you actually are enthusiastic about, because if you don't, like, if you pursue the boring safe option, there's no fucking guarantee that it's going to turn out well for you either.
No. No, not at all. And I think we're seeing that generationally, that the generations that are currently in all the boardrooms of the bigger companies just don't understand the younger generations. And there's no, whereas we were in a kind of legacy environment where it was all about how it was done before, that's not feasible now. The world has changed drastically even before COVID. And so the generations now are looking at that and buckling and saying, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be exactly a carbon copy of everything else. And they're also being drip fed, AI is taking all the jobs, everything's being automated, and so what are they supposed to do? And I think we're seeing more of the younger generation, like Gen X, Gen X, I'm a Gen X, Gen Z, coming through and
Yeah,
saying, well, let's give it a go and not do things the way that they've been done before. And that's
yeah,
why I think sometimes the bigger companies are missing out on that talent that could keep them going for a little bit longer.
yeah. There's an element of, like, with all the job insecurity that they face in their generation, it almost encourages, I suppose, entrepreneurialism,
Mm,
in the sense that they're like, well, no job is guaranteed. We know that. Like, there's the days of sort of working in one factory for like
yeah,
37 years or something. That's gone. People don't
yeah,
look at sort of what's it like loyalty to their employer in the same way that their dad or grandfather did.
mm,
So there's that, and then there's the actual job market as it is right now. And so I have family members or extended family members who are younger than I am. They're in their sort of early 30s and late 20s, and they're struggling to find a place that will give them a full-time job. Like they're still being tasked to do, a a permanent member of
mm,
staff's responsibilities, but it's like 3 days a week. So it's kind
yeah.
of part-time. And so I think in that younger generation, Gen Z or Zoomers, I've heard them called. I
Oh
sound
yeah.
like such an old bastard these days. I'm like, oh, I've
I'm
heard
the
they're called
same.
Zoomers. um, but I wonder, if what they're being offered is 3 days a week, well, that leaves them with two, and it might not be the ideal solution for them as they're trying to save up money for a flat deposit or something. But it does leave them with 2 days to focus on something else, that they're interested in, starting a business or building a
Yeah.
YouTube channel or something.
Yeah. And I think that's the difference. The older generations are used to the idea of companies being big tower blocks with your name on the front, and that's the success. But nowadays, the businesses that are coming through are content creators, they're influencers, and you don't need anybody other than your audience to keep happy. And so you can be more creative. For so many years we've belittled creative activity for science and maths, and we're not all mathematicians and we're not all scientists, and there's a hell of a lot of fantastic creative people who now have an outlet, not just to show how creative they are, but make a lot of money from it. So
Yeah.
Why, if you're a young person and you're thinking, I could set up on Twitch in 10 minutes and give it a go, or I could go through all of these grades and go through university, get a huge bloody debt at the end of it, and still not be guaranteed any kind of job. I don't understand why people think that that's a bit of a strange situation to go in. It seems like an obvious choice when you're not being given any other choices.
Yeah, yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it's sort of like the days of creatives being exploited by, you know, quote unquote, like big business people. Like, I suppose record companies are a good example. Like, they'll take a sort of flowery creative in a cardigan with an acoustic guitar who writes beautiful arty songs and
Mm,
then sell it to the masses and make a fucking mint. Meanwhile, like the singer songwriter who created the art is
mm,
left to rot, you know, on sort of
yeah.
like Spotify royalties and then sent out to tour for like 3 years, like
Yeah.
2.5 years longer than maybe they would have done like 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So the days of exploiting artists and creatives in that sense, I feel like that period is shortening, and it's I don't know, it's narrowing to an extent now, where those creatives are now in a position where they can actually market their own
Yeah.
art and milk it themselves. They don't need the sort of middlemen in the same way that they did.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, before, if you wanted to release music, or you wanted to write a book, or you wanted to do any form of TV work, you had to go through the major studios, the major companies, which meant that what we got was the art that they wanted us to create, not the art that we wanted to create. And, you know, certainly you'd have somebody start off with some fairly vanilla type pop stuff that they started with that got them seen, and then they'd have this arc of, this is the stuff that I really want to do, and it's drastically different, and they can only do that because they've now got the influence over the company to go, hey, you have got to let me do my own thing. Wing out a stage where so I don't know, do you know the singer Kate Nash?
Yeah.
Yeah, so she's got an album that she wants to release, and no record company will take her on. So she's gone to TikTok and said, guys, I've got some music that I want to release. What do you think? And now she's got conversations with record companies because the TikTok fans have come out and gone, actually, why are you not doing this? And so the tables have turned. The artists have a route to the fans that the companies can't control. And that's, you know, it's this kind of democratization of capitalism. It just, you can't have particular people in control anymore, which I think is much better.
Yeah, I mean, I've read a few blogs and articles and stuff about how and it's sort of similar to what you were just touching on a minute ago, how you don't actually get the product that the artist wanted to present to you. What you get is the product that the artist created, and then it goes through 3 or 4 different layers. Like, it goes through, I don't know, legal, who say, yes, this is okay, you can say this in your gangster rap song, and then it goes through marketing, and they go, actually, probably not a great idea to have a image of Jesus being set on fire on the, you know. And then, you know, it's a lot of this stuff would be upsetting to people somewhere, but if this is the artist's vision, you have to kind of respect that, right? But famously or infamously, once producers and legal and the CEO or whatever of these big companies get involved, what you get is a sort of sanitized, cellophane wrapped, like pristine mass market version or interpretation of what it probably should have been. I think the best example I've heard of that actually is sort of showing my age a little bit here, but when In Utero came out by Nirvana,
Mm,
that was the first album of theirs that I got, and I ended up becoming a huge fan of theirs.
mm,
And it was only like 20 years later that I read a thing about how Kurt Cobain struggled and fought and argued to get his original sort of mixes of In Utero
mm,
released as like the finished copy, and eventually he just got tired of arguing with, I think it was Geffen Records he was signed to.
yeah.
Very, very similar situation as what we're talking about here, where producers and management and, you know, everyone wants to get the maximum amount of money for their investment in that product, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're like, well, if you sing it like this, then it might sell more in like China, or you're like,
Yeah.
oh, well, all right.
No, exactly. And it's telling because we've got albums where they used to get launched with maybe 10 or 11 songs. And now that the artist can download straight to Spotify or Apple Music, there's 20, 30 songs on there. And the fans like the process. We live in a world now where the fans can see behind the curtain. They don't want a polished version that they're not sure. They want to see the process because they want to support the whole thing. And I think when we're dealing with the bigger companies, they're designed to keep the curtain up, so that you can't see what they're doing in the background, but everyone can. So there's no point doing it. They're taking their time. Meanwhile, artists are going on to things like Spotify and just going direct to their fan base, and then the
Mm.
companies are running to catch them up, which is
I
laughable.
Yeah, like I see sort of pros and cons to that, and I'll expand on that a little bit. So I love the fact that artists can get their music out directly to fans, and I really love the idea that it's sort of a bit more independent and a bit more gritty, and that side, like whether we're talking about music or comedy or whatever, if it's gritty and a bit grungy and a bit like, I'm all about it. Uh, but I do sort of think with record companies trying to sort of put up a curtain and keep their artists a little bit removed from the fans, I think I kind of like that, because I think it elicits a feeling that the artist is a bit magical and a bit mysterious. Like, I don't think you should know everything about your favorite singer. I don't think there should be interviews of them on every magazine, and they're constantly on TV. And I think it's good to be have a bit of mystique.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah, there was definitely more fun when you had to kind of guess what someone thought rather than see it initially. And also, we have the issue now where trolling exists. So we've got a lot more artists having to deal with some PR that they've not had to deal with before because the company were there to help them out. So yeah, it goes both ways. It is better because they can put out something that feels more pure, but it's not great because with that comes all of the trolls and all of the people who see them and expect still that shined exterior, not that grittiness. They're kind of like, we want to see everything, but everything has to be
Yeah.
perfect if you're all right.
Yeah, like we're used to a certain standard, aren't we? Of sort of $3 million music video promo clips, and a Dr. Dre beat or a Timberland beat on every album. And
Yeah, yeah,
here's a wild thought. It's very little to do with entrepreneurs or startup strategy,
that's
but
fine.
how close do you think we are, business wise, to? Because like, let me preface this question right by saying, back in the day, the reason that record labels became record labels was because they owned like sort of pressing plants, or they had certain deals with regards to logistics, and they had studios of their own, so they would sign an artist and press it, and then send them out on the road and so on.
Mm,
So that was a record company, and then over the years, it changed from records to CDs, but kind of the same process, still
mm,
pressing and marketing. And now we're in an era where people don't actually buy a physical product. They just stream it. Like, they don't even buy the fucking album anymore, like on
yeah,
iTunes or whatever. It's literally just streamed.
yeah.
So there's no real reason why an artist should or would sign with a quote unquote record company like Sony or BMG or Time Warner. So
Mm.
here's my question. How close do you think we are to someone like Netflix, or like, trying to think of another big media company like MTV, I guess, maybe, like somebody just going, yeah, well, like, we're signing Rihanna, and we put her music on Spotify just like you could or I could.
Yeah.
And then they just, they've got marketing budget, like, because that's effectively what it is now, isn't it? It's like, you're not a record company, you're a marketing company. Do you
Yeah,
think we'll
yeah.
we'll start seeing that?
Oh, definitely. But I think it is cyclical. I think we simplify everything, and then when it gets simple, we start complicating it again with bits that we maybe don't want to do ourselves. So, a music company might also look after the PR, for example. So the artist thinks, well, yeah, I want the direct connection, but I want you to deal with PR. And then it becomes easier for them to also organise the concerts and organise the merchandise. And then we're backing what looks like a record company, apart from the decision making process of what goes out and what doesn't. So I think they'll become more like a service company servicing the artists rather than the other way round. I can
That's quite
definitely see
cool.
that happening.
Yeah, yeah, that would be, and you could pair maybe like their film contracts and shit, because a lot of musicians end up going into film, even if it's just like a little bit part here and there, don't they? So you could
Yeah,
see if one of them was signed to like, I don't know, like Sony, you have a cinema thing, don't they? Cinema
yeah,
function.
yeah.
So you could see that like if they're servicing, as you say, like the artist,
Mm.
it would make sense for them to sort of like pair that. I'm sure there's a word for that. Is it like vertical
Yeah,
integration?
get into different verticals. So it's like with any content creator, whether it's artist or wherever, the thing that they're known for is only a small proportion of the income generated, right? So if you look at game streamers, for example, over on Twitch,
Yeah.
yeah, they get some money from Twitch or they get money from YouTube, but the real money is in merchandising. It's in the other things around it, and I think that's what uh, the artists themselves are getting really good at working through. So yeah, I release this music, but through that I get the walk-on part on a film, or I get a concert that I wouldn't have got by myself, or it's a visibility tool, but they know that they're going to have to go into other areas to really generate the amount of revenue that is possible. Because if they don't do it, somebody else will just do it in their place.
Yeah, that's a big thing as well, isn't it? It's sort of, I mean, my own situation or my own example of that is trying to build a YouTube channel,
Mm.
and it topped out like over 1,000 subscribers. Big moment.
Yep.
That was a month or two ago, and I mentioned to my girlfriend, I was like, yeah, I think in about an hour or two we're gonna get over 1,000 subscribers, and she was like, does that mean you can start like doing like the Google ad, like making money out of the YouTube ads? I was like, whoa, like, slow down.
Hold
Like
on.
it's so like hilariously bad. I mean, no disrespect to YouTube. Thank you so much for building a platform that's allowing me to have this lovely conversation with Lee tonight. Uh, but it is, I mean, in terms of YouTube's ad revenue structure, I think it's probably on a par with Spotify's like musician revenue
Yeah.
streams. Like it's not, you're not going to get rich out of doing it. And this
Yeah.
taps straight back into the point that you just made, which is if you don't find a way to monetize your own shit, then someone else is going to do it, right? So YouTube will step in, put adverts at the beginning of your content.
Mm.
They're making money out of that because brands are paying YouTube to push this advert in there. Well, you need to find a way to effectively create your own adverts at like at the top and at the end. And you know, I can say quite certainly we're way off attracting any sponsors yet. Uh, but but yeah, it seems like that's I don't know, my own sort of example of what you were touching on there.
Yeah.
Um,
Although I will say, they did some research on Instagram influencers a little while ago, and they worked out that somebody with 2,500 followers, but
mm,
engaged followers, was more profitable to sponsor than someone with over 100,000, because the more followers there are, the less the only reason they're there is because everyone else is there. They're not really engaging with the content. So
yeah,
it's never about the followers, it's always about the engagement. Because if you can prove to a company, hey, I've got 500 people watching me and they are all commenting and chatting and responding to it, if I say your product's really good, they're listening far more than if, Kim Kardashian says something, or one of the sort of Instagram influencers says something that everyone knows is an ad. They probably have never used the product. There's all sorts of cynicism around it. So you never look at
yeah,
the following number, always engagement.
yeah. That's interesting. It's sort of, I suppose there probably is a term for it. I was about to say there should be a word for that, like sort of, smart sponsorship. Like it's not about just, funneling out adverts and paying people to like
Yeah,
witlessly promote it. It's about finding someone who actually could be attached to it in a sort of almost authentic way. you know
almost.
One of the great things, just to sort of use Spotify as the segue for this, right? So one of the great things about Spotify, and before it's sort of MySpace or YouTube is a good example also, is that in this sort of era of opening up the floodgates, if you like, to platforms where anyone can start a YouTube channel or anyone can upload their music, it's great because literally, like, anyone has a shot at pushing something out there that could catch fire, right?
Yeah.
But the con to that pro is that literally anyone can do it. It's so like infinitely harder to find like the needle in the haystack, the actual gem out there. And if like anyone that's listening will know this, that when you go on Spotify now, it's almost like we've lost something around sort of finding a gem, because what happens is you go through your Discover Weekly playlist and Spotify recommends and all this stuff. You hear a song that you like, but it's not like it would have been 20 years ago where you go, wicked, I've got to get that, and maybe I'll buy the album. Now it's like, oh, I love that song. Anyway, on to the next, like you endlessly go through this ocean of content.
Yeah.
And I wondered if in you sort of opening up the floodgates in perhaps a smaller scale to people and taking their startup ideas, their new business ideas, is there the same sort of pro and con to it, where it's like, look, the pro is that you could help change people's lives and start up a business and they could be the lord or lady of their own destiny. That's amazing. But the con to that is that literally anyone can pitch you an idea and have you had to sit through some fucking terrible ideas.
Well, I've been relatively lucky in that I haven't heard any truly like, don't do that. That's a really, really bad idea. I've had a lot of people who have said, this is the next Spotify, this is the next Uber. And you're like, please don't say that, because that straight away kills the idea. You don't want to be a copy of anything.
Yeah.
But it's really bloody hard not to be a copy of something with so many ideas. I mean, the market will determine itself, right? If 10 ideas come out, one of them is going to shoot off and the others are going to die. And I think the bigger risk is probably people seeing, a startup like Airbnb, for example, and they think, oh, I can achieve that level of success. And you can, but they don't realize just how much luck is involved in the right place at the right time with the right people, the right
Yeah.
energy. It's like that, the unicorn of going viral on social media. Startups are exactly the same. If you start with a realistic view of, I'm just going to start now, and if I get one person, that'll be one milestone, and then when I get 10, that'll be another milestone. That's way better than doing some kind of manifesting chant to get your first 10 million, because it's just, yes, it can happen, but so much of it is luck. And so it's not so much bad business ideas, it's bad thinking behind the business idea, that you just go, no, you're not, that's not a good idea. Not for you in your current sort of mind frame.
Yeah. It's sort of, I tell you what it reminds me of hearing that is like when I've read books on parenting and blogs on parenting, and they say how important it is to instill the idea of like achievable goals to your kids.
Yeah.
Rather than, because if they grow up and they're like, I'm going to be the next Justin Bieber. And you're just like, well, maybe. I mean, it is possible, but, and then they set themselves up for, I don't know, at worst, a humiliating, crushing feeling of failure. And likelihood is that at best it's not going to work out well, and they'll just be disappointed. So it's sort of more about sort of encouraging them to set these little milestone goals, where it's like, okay, well, your first goal is, I don't know, maybe you want to do a demo tape, or second goal is you want to do your first gig, and just like keep shooting for these slightly bigger targets. And then you still get the sort of kickback, like the dopamine and the pride in having achieved something, but it's not in the same sort of risk of, as I say, sort of that feeling of soul crushing failure.
Yeah, and
Um,
I think I am quite optimistic. Like if somebody says to me, I want to be the next Jeff Bezos, I'm like, cool, how's that going to happen? Right. And I do think, there's that awful phrase like shoot for the moon and you'll end up in the stars.
yeah,
This kind of idea that you can have the big dream, but you've got to be realistic about how to get there. And that it's those little successes along the way that make you think, okay, so I didn't quite get as rich as Jeff Bezos, but within what I did achieve, it was brilliant and I had fun while I was doing it. What's worse is actually if you start and you don't have any idea of where you want to go. So you have no concept of whether you're succeeding or not because you have got no idea what you're aiming for in the first place. And that's usually when people seek me out and go, I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, come and talk to me.
yeah. I mean, it must be nice to be in a position to like, it's quite a positive job that you have, isn't it? To know that that you could take somebody's idea and help them mold it and sculpt it and give it direction. And like, have you got sort of like case study stories where you're just like, this girl or this guy was, he was just working in a barber shop, or he was doing, X, Y, and Z, and now I helped him get on the way, and look at his life now. Like, is there stuff like that you sort of look back on, or?
Yeah, I mean, one that stands out is someone who she runs like it's a children's entertainment band. So they're a rock band, but they do kids concerts, and they're brilliant. And I started working with them a little bit before the pandemic because we were just trying to maximize like what she was doing and where she was going with it. And then the pandemic hit, and she was like, I do live concerts. I am so screwed.
Game over. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, what do I do? So throughout the pandemic, I was saying to people, just stay visible. Even if you can't actually work, just remind people you're there. So we were like, right, go on your Facebook Live page and just talk to people or play songs or whatever. And she did like a request half an hour. So for half an hour, she went live and the kids could ask for a song and she would play it. She happens to be a keyboard player who can play by ear. So she hums the song and she's playing it. It's amazing. But she did that, got through the pandemic. She set up like a virtual tip jar, and people would contribute because for half an hour of a day in lockdown, their 2-3-year-olds were entertained, and they were very, very grateful. At the end of lockdown, it's like, okay, so now what do I do with this? Because I'm suddenly more visible. And she was getting much better offers. So she got a phone call from a park, and they said, oh, can you come and sing perform for us in the summer? And she was like, yeah, sure. What date are you thinking? And they went, no, the summer.
Oh,
So
wicked.
yeah,
Residency. Yeah.
they wanted the band for like the whole summer. And she was like, oh my God, just from coming from, I don't know how a live band is supposed to work in lockdown, to then is amazing. And she transitioned a little bit and moved over to TikTok, and she does TikTok concerts now. So she goes live and performs. But I saw TikTok today and she's doing a promo with them because
Oh,
she's
wicked. Like
doing,
partnering with them.
yeah, yeah. And it's just like, this was someone who she absolutely adores what she does, the whole band does. And she just wanted to keep doing it. And when you know that just by having a conversation with someone, you can make them feel like sometimes you're giving them the answer, but a lot of the time you're just telling them, just don't give up. Like, I just tell me what to do to just help you, and we'll just keep pushing through. It's just the best job ever. It's lovely.
Yeah, it sounds nice. I mean, it's I think you have a sort of a more realized like defined version of, like, the nearest that I've had to that is like training junior developers.
Mm.
So you take somebody who's got like scarcely any experience of coding, and then you just sort of give them a few exercises, and then they come back to you with a bunch of questions. You're like, no, you can do this. This is fine. Like, don't worry about it. It's cool. Like, and just over weeks and months and stuff, then they get to a certain standard, and you're like, fuck, like when they first started, like they could barely do X, Y, and Z, and now here they are, and I don't know, going off for interviews elsewhere, and like doubling their salary, and it's quite
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. I love it. And I work with very early startups. Like they're not on anyone's radar when I'm talking to them because
Mm.
they either think, well, I'm too small, I'm too early, no one will be interested. But also, they really don't have a lot of cash. There's not this pool of money that they're going to put into having someone help them put a business plan together or a strategy. But I deliberately work with them because I want them to not just get going and have someone believe in them in those early stages, but also help train them on how to deal with success. Because I've worked with the larger companies, I know, I've heard every sales pitch you can possibly imagine. And, I've got a very high cynicism level for most selling. So if I can get those business owners to get to a point where when they have enough money that they get on other people's radar, they're walking in the room like really confident of, yeah, I'm not gonna sign up to anything that I don't know will improve my business. Whereas I've walked into rooms with managers in corporate, and they come in and they go, well, I don't know really why you're here, and just tell me what you sell. And you just see the eyes light up with just how much they're going to put through as consultancy spend. And when you're a big company, it's not your money. When you're a small company, every penny is your money.
Yeah,
So working with them when it's early just means that I can avoid them wasting money with somebody else later.
yeah, sort of like hit them with the tools that they're going to need to have those conversations in the
Yeah,
not too distant future
yeah,
before they become the next Jeff Bezos. I get it.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
One thing I wanted to touch on was, and we've sort of tapped into it with uh, your lady who was doing the
Mm,
online stuff, and then now she's partnering with TikTok. Um,
mm,
but like within the pandemic, I suppose traditionally the idea of attracting investors, or writing business plans, and creating a startup, you had this idea that you'd have to rent office space, that you would have to hire a couple of, like, I don't know, admin assistants or sales guys, or to get it up and running. Do you think the pandemic has changed that? Do you think it's sort of pushed people to just do it for themselves at home and do it online more aggressively, or?
Yeah, I think a lot more went online, and as soon as things go online, your costs kind of go down anyway because it's physical space and physical things that really cost the most.
Mm,
I think going into the pandemic, startups were already operating where nobody knew who they were, they didn't have any money, and everything was trying to scream into the void to tell people that you were there. As lockdown happened, all the big players had to just turn inward and work out how the hell they were going to get everyone to work from home. So they kind of had to leave the market quite a lot and go
right.
into almost like a hibernation state. So startups were able to just go, okay, well, this is just a normal day for me because I've got no resources, but I've never got any resources. So they were able to utilize what was there. And most of them were already on things like Zoom. And, any startup knows there's free versions of almost any piece of software you could need. There's Fiverr to get copywriting, website design, editors, graphic designers, for cheap. So they already know how to bootstrap. So when it went into the lockdown, it was like, well, we know how to operate in this environment. So we actually didn't see startups falter as much as the bigger companies who hacked millions and millions of pounds of infrastructure and real estate suddenly completely empty, and having to create a new infrastructure for people to use at home. It changed it almost overnight. It went different.
Yeah, it sort of speaks to this whole idea that like corporations, big banks, things do they move slowly in these organizations. They like I've worked in a couple of different like FTSE 100 institutions, and it's just team after team after den of developers, after like project managers and analysts and like HR teams, and it is difficult for them, like something as gigantic as a pandemic that changes and like upends the way that you work. To expect these institutions with like 5,000 employees or 20,000 employees to be able to adapt and evolve quickly is quite an ask, isn't it? But it's in startup culture, you're right, it's sort of like, I mean, when I was so I'm in a sort of scale up at the moment, but the startup that I was working at before was all remote. The startup before that was sort of all actually no, it wasn't all remote, but it was like you could easily work from home if you wanted to that day. Like whereas like in the larger institutions, it's I think it's been really hard for them to adapt to it.
It's I'm going to go off on another rant here. It's laziness in the way that they do their line management and the training. Right?
Right.
I've been in sort of D&I circles for a while, because even though I was doing COO roles, I'd always get involved in D&I's diversity and inclusion.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So one of the big keys was always flexible working. Like, how do we get more inclusive by giving people ways of flexing? And the question was, the biggest difficulty was always from line managers saying, well, how do I know if they're working if I can't see them? And it was like, the easiest place to not work is in an office. And I used to sit in Canary Wharf, where all the banks are. You'd have people sitting, working for 15 hours. But half that was, coming in, taking a shower because they biked into work. And then they go for a coffee, and then they go for their breakfast. And then they'd meet someone in a coffee shop for a drink. And they might start work about 2 p.m. And then they'd have a little bit, the work compressed down. But it's so easy to not work in an office, because all your line manager is looking for is, can they see you? Whereas when you're remote, they have to set you objectives, know what quality looks like, know how to communicate that to you, keep the vibe going. So I think a lot of the push that we're seeing right now of getting people back in is because the line managers do not have the tools to manage remotely, and they won't spend money on that sort of stuff. And it just irritates me no end.
Yeah, it's so self-defeating though as well. Like, I mean, I'm sort of in the process of recruiting and hiring and interviewing and things, and I hear horror stories from people where they say, yeah, like we were really quick to adapt to work from home. Remote working was fine in the pandemic, but now that we're sort of coming through, I mean, arguably, right? Like I just got a text from my GP earlier saying, whatever happens, this, like, proactively they're texting me to say, don't go to A&E because A&E is really full. I'm like, great, thanks for the warning. I'll try not to have a serious accident. Anyway, but yeah, so this chap was saying, in the in the early months of the pandemic, they were super quick to adapt, but now they're actually bringing it back to, they expect you in the office 3 days a week. And this guy was saying, like, people are just resigning left, right, and center, and I wonder, like, if you are a slightly bigger company and you're trying to sort of bring this, like, mandated 4 days a week or whatever back in, I think people will just leave because they've had a taste of this sort of freedom and this work-life balance. And from my own perspective, it's really important for dads and mums too to be able to know that you can just get up and walk your kid to school. Yep. Or to do the school run, to pack their lunchbox for them. Like, it's good that they can see their mum and their dad in the morning, and for them to know that their mum and their dad are going to be there for like bath time and bed in the evening. And I think when let's say like a big company like Amstrad,
Mm.
who I'm putting out of a hat because I think Alan Sugar is sort of infamously against work from home. He's like, no, I like my staff in the office, and I'm like, you're going to lose all your fucking staff, mate, because I don't know any front end developers who would, if there was a job at Amstrad for 70k or a
Mm.
job at ABC Startup for
Mm.
60k, but it was work from home, I think they'd take the 60k one because they like the cost in terms of commuting and the cost like in terms of time, but also financially would be a non-start. They'd just be like, why should I accept the role that's modestly more money if I'm going to spend all of that more money on the train? Like, it
Yeah.
makes no sense, and shorten my life by 5 years by the fucking commuter stress.
No, definitely. And it doesn't make sense. But the only thing corporates have had over smaller companies has been the level of salary that they could offer, right? And the benefits of like a free gym and, a season ticket loan usually. But this is why it's such a good opportunity for smaller companies, for startups who can get access to resources who would never have thought of working for a startup, because we had the remnants of that, not necessarily a job for life, but definitely, well, a job in corporate's safer, isn't it? But given that a vast majority of the large companies have gone through massive redundancy rounds through COVID, and have gone lean for so much, it makes it's not a job for life. It's not any more secure than a startup, and you can probably get a better quality of life as well. And I worked in tech for 20 odd years, and you walk on a floor that was a development floor, and it was quiet because everyone sits there with their headphones on, ignoring everyone because they don't want to be talking, they want to be coding.
Yeah.
So them being at home really, really doesn't matter.
Yeah, there's a definite sort of argument of like, well, if it's all about the team culture and the social aspect of it, then why are we all sat here ignoring each other?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But I will say that my current team is super sociable. We all get on great and have a good chat. So yeah, I feel like something was. It would be remiss of me to not give them a doff of the cap at that juncture. Something else I wanted to ask you was, we've come through Brexit. There was a lot of uncertainty with that on business. Still is. We've come through lockdowns, COVID, social distancing, huge effects on retail, small businesses in that area. And now we have this sort of this like overarching fear that we might all get nuked and fried alive by.
Yeah, because we didn't need anything else to stress us out right now, did we?
Right. It wasn't like we had uneventful like years before this. This is, but yeah, it's the cherry on the top of the cake that we just didn't need.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, assuming that Putin doesn't nuke us,
Mm.
um, we still have to. I mean, it's not like if this war or invasion or whatever gets called off tomorrow, it's not like the world is going to go back to being amazing. Like, we've still got some unresolved issues, and one of those that I keep coming back to on different episodes of this is automation
Mm.
and the replacement of human labor by robots, effectively, and artificial intelligence, machine learning, uh, whatever. Um, where do you sort of stand on that? Like, where do you think we're headed in terms of small businesses, employment, labor versus automation?
I mean, I talk to a lot of startups who will talk about AI and talk about, augmented reality, and we've got the horror show that is the metaverse coming through at the moment. And there's this idea that we're all going to exist in this kind of virtual world, and that machines going to do everything for us. But I actually think, in a way, the pandemic has reminded us of how useful it is to be a human and have compassion and empathy. And there are certain questions and certain things that you can't necessarily teach AI right now on how to act like a human. They can behave like one, but they can't think
Mm,
as quickly as we can. I also think that if you look at the rate of change that we're going through, there's there's no way of predicting whether, yes, the old jobs will go because they were boring jobs to do. So actually, we don't really want people to think that that's all they're worth. But new jobs will emerge. If you've got, if you look at green tech, that all of that, that whole infrastructure is going to have to be serviced and maintained. But we need to skill people up for that. Yes, we'll lose some jobs, but there'll be others that come up, and AI will replace some jobs. But I always think there's going to be a need for some kind of human oversight, particularly when you're dealing with other humans. Anyone who's gone to a website and seen that bloody bot start up in the corner going, how can I help you? It's like that, the remnants of the Microsoft Word little paperclip.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
hate it. We absolutely know that there's no person behind that screen. And the COVID has reminded us that actually people do matter, and that human connection matters. And so I see it acting to help our lives, but not necessarily taking over everything. But we just have to focus on the opportunities that are going to be made from it, not the opportunities lost.
I suppose things like influencers and to a lesser extent, or maybe even a greater extent, I don't know, like podcasts, things that are rooted in humans talking and interacting with each other, are things that are very difficult to fake with technology, and certainly will be in like the next couple of decades at least.
Yeah.
I do wonder, like, if you could create a sort of iRobot, like an actual, like an entity that you could have a transactional conversation with,
Mm.
that could speak sense and have some sort of approximation of intelligence and
Mm.
respond to you and shit, would people listen to a podcast, listen, like, presented by that, or like a song that was written by AI, if it had, like, would it do something to you? Would it give you goosebumps if it was the right melody but you knew that it was written by a robot? Like,
I don't think it would, because actually we like to think that we're quite logical, and humans are messy. You only have to follow any argument that goes on Twitter, and someone thinks that they're being entirely rational, and everyone else is going, what the hell are you talking about? So I
yeah,
think there's always that element of logic doesn't work. We're not fully logic, we're not fully emotional, we're a bit of both. And, we need that. We need that connection. I do think the inclusion of podcasts and more content where people are talking is a symptom of the fact that, okay, so if we're not needed to for our bodies, like if we're not doing manual labor, then what's the purpose of us? And if you think back to times of ancient Greece and things like that, the reason they had all these massive philosophical debates was because they had the bloody time to have them. They weren't in the fields working. So if we're going to get humanity back to some sort of
mm.
normality, we need to have the conversations, and we can't do that if we're all busy working. So maybe AI sorts that out.
That's a really sort of upbeat and optimistic way of looking at it. Like, if we replace everyone with robots, so there's no more checkout staff, there's no more cleaners, there's no more like, you fill in the blanks, then everyone becomes philosophers. It's like, I'm like,
They get the option to.
I worry for the future of the human race, because like, my faith in us, evidenced by our political activity and behavior over the last like 5-6 years,
Mm.
I just think if you took people's manual labor jobs away from them, and they had no way of sort of, or very little way of saving money or even paying their bills, I just worry what would happen in that sort of instance.
Yeah, and I think that's the difficulty. It used to be that we would have the philosophical debate about who we are, and then our politics and our social structure would be derived from that.
Mm.
Whereas at the moment, it's like we've got a backdraft. It's just how politics wants to operate is shoving us in a particular philosophical direction. It's working the wrong way. politics and society is supposed to work for us and to care for everyone in that society. You know, I think some of the most meaningful contributions can come from the people who have literally nothing but keep a smile on their face. Like, how do they do that? You know, it's easy to keep a smile on your face when you've got lots of money in the bank, but how do you keep going when you have nothing? I want that person to be worried about their money and where that's coming from. I want them to explain that resilience to the rest of us.
I suppose there's two schools of thought on it, isn't there? Like, slightly more insulting people would say ignorance is bliss, that they don't really understand how fucked they are, so they just sort of carry on about their day smiling. But I also think there's a school of thought that actually when you are in, and I'm sure there's been studies that back this up, when you're in financial hardship, when your life is actually struggle and challenge, you are actually at your happiest. Like, it's the human condition that when we're challenged, when we've got problems to solve or things to be like fretting about, like, we're problem solvers at our core. And so when we have that challenge, that stress, it puts us in our sort of natural like fighting mode, I guess. I remember listening to a podcast a couple of years ago where a guy called, oh, I'm never going to remember his fucking name now, but Johan Hari, I think his name is.
Yeah.
And he was saying these tests that they had done, and stats and stuff that I'm sure we could go away and Google. But he was saying, like, if you interview the children of billionaires who all live in Malibu, they've all got fucking like anxiety and depression disorders and stuff because they've got no challenge. They've got no frustration in their life and nothing to work towards. Like, what are you going to tell a sort of 15-year-old who's already got like, you know, 100 million in the bank? Like, what are you going to work hard on? Fucking nothing. Like, so they're miserable. Like, they've got no challenge there. And I think there's something to that. I think it's like, if you have a level of hardship in your life and challenge, it G's you up. And I'm not saying, I'm not pretending for a second that my situation is hardship now, but I'm familiar with it. And like, I grew up on council estates, and I'm, you know, been exposed to certain things in my life that I sort of am familiar with that lifestyle. And I can see how sort of, you know, striving and like working towards something and trying to fix something and like does sort of breed a level of happiness, you know, and to keep you going, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I grew up on a council estate as well, and there was definitely a sense of working to get somewhere, whether that was like out of the estate, which was always an option, but that feeling that something that you did mattered, I suppose. And we saw it at the beginning of the pandemic, like when lockdown happened and Facebook groups and next door were full of people going, okay, I'm okay to leave the house, so is there anyone local who can't?
Yeah.
And I can bring them shopping. And, you know, we felt like we could do something. But that was never going to last for 2 years. We were always going to get pretty exhausted of that. But that time was a time, I think, where everybody did have a moment of being equaled out a little bit more and going, oh, none of us can go out here. And this isn't about how much money you've got. It's what your health is like and how vulnerable you are. And we did come together. We did try to look after one another. That has disappeared to a large extent. I'm not that much of an optimist, but it was there. And I just like to think that if it happened once, it can happen again.
Yeah. I'll drink to that. I mean, I remember that period also where people were so used to living in sort of like cities and commuting, and their friends lived in like 2 towns over, and, you know, their families are like 45 minutes away from them. And so suddenly you get thrown into a fucking pandemic lockdown, and it's sort of almost re-villagified people, where it's like, oh shit, like, who's my neighbors? Like, we can't leave the house, we're isolating. Do you think they could drop off some like milk and bread for us? And like, you know, going real old school. Okay, cool. Listen, I'm gonna have to leave it there, Lee, because we've been gassing away for an hour. But thank you so much for joining me.
No.
if anyone wants to catch up with Lee, she's on Twitter at Lee. I was going to say at Lee Lamb. Is that right? At Lee Lamb Strategy.
Strategist, yeah.
And I will be back next week for a solo episode again on Wednesday, when I'll be picking a new story and ripping it apart and roasting it a little bit. And I'll be back next Friday night with another guest. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and I'll catch up with you soon. All right, ciao for now. Goodbye.